Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, the All Iowa podcast. We are your hosts, JD and Keith. We are here week number 7, technically, although game number 6 for Iowa. On the heels of a nice, comfortable win over Washington. Probably not something a lot of people expected. I think I said last week that I thought Iowa was going to come out with a little bit of fire, and it wasn't going to be as close as a lot of people thought it was going to be. I wasn't sure about that in the first quarter, but
I think what you said was it going to be kind of like a Minnesota game where Iowa would come out and struggle in the first and then go ahead and put it away in the second, which they did, but they didn't really struggle in the first either. So I think they put as close to a complete game as we've seen all season. And I thought it'd be closer. I thought it would be like a 20-17 type of situation. I thought that Iowa would struggle with Washington's number 8 rated defense, total defense in the nation. I thought they'd struggle a little bit with that. They didn't. Surprising, Iowa played as well as I've seen them play under the Tim Lester offense, on offense. The numbers weren't great passing, 8 of 12, I think it was, or something similar to that.
13, I think, yeah.
8 of 13 for 108 yards. Not going to blow you away, those numbers, but you know what? He didn't need to. He didn't need to blow you away. When you got Caleb Johnson running 21 times for 166 yards and catching a touchdown pass and also, running for 2.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't need to throw the ball around a lot. I think he's efficient. He was a very efficient quarterback yesterday.
We'll get into it, and let's get to our question of the week from last week first, and then we'll get into the breakdown a little bit more. Last week we asked you, when was the last time Iowa played Washington, not Wisconsin, because they played Wisconsin last year. When was the last time Iowa played Washington, and what was the score? And surprisingly, nobody answered the question, which wasn't too tough to figure out. 1995, they brought it up on the broadcast a couple of different times. 38-18, Iowa beat Washington in the Sun Bowl. Washington was a 7-3-1 co-Pac-12 champions at the time. Iowa really put it to them. I remember watching that game, and Shaw had a heck of a game against them.
In fact, if I remember correctly, Washington scored the last 2 touchdowns of the game, and they went for 2 on both of them, didn't get it. So, 38-18. Yeah, 38-6 at one point, and it was getting late, and they scored a couple of garbage touchdowns late and made it closer than it really appeared, or than it really was.
Small solace for the Rose Bowl losses, but we'll take it. At that point, going into yesterday's game, Iowa and Washington had played 6 times. They were 3-3 against each other. Last time, I think you said the last time they played in Iowa City was when?
Actually, it was 1964, and it was an Iowa win, 28-18. One of the few wins Iowa had between the years of 1960 and 1979. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it wasn't. There was some pretty lean years in there.
Oh yeah,
that's for sure. But so let's get on to yesterday's game, which was a 40-16 Iowa victory. You mentioned the stats weren't eye-popping. However you think about it, Iowa only had 51 offensive plays. Washington controlled the clock in the first half, especially. But I think the key point was that blocked field goal, letting them basically, they out-yardaged Iowa by about 70, 80 yards total.
65, I think, 65 maybe.
And that first drive was 73, and they came up empty, so that was huge. Based on the first 2 drives, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a long day. They've talked about their quarterback having extreme accuracy and one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the country. Yeah, he's not really throwing deep either. He's just taking the small, short stuff, and we could take a lesson from that. I think that we don't have to throw deep. You can use those slants. You can use the middle. Um, they had those spots in the zone that they could find, and they just picked that part apart in those first two drives. And then I don't know if there was a fire lit underneath them or if Phil Parker jumped all over them, but the defensive line started to get pressure, and that completely changed the look of that game. Once
Yeah.
that defensive line started putting pressure on the quarterback a little bit more, you saw his accuracy drop. You saw him hesitate and make quicker decisions. Not that he wasn't making quick decisions already. I mean, that's the main reason why he has such high numbers is because he does make quick decisions and they're quick passes. So you don't have the opportunity to get to him as easy. But there was times where Iowa was in the backfield immediately, and that really forced his hand, and you saw that he didn't have as good an accuracy when he was under pressure, and definitely not a guy that looks like he's very comfortable throwing on the run. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
The YA black, like you said before, I that was key. The YA black field goal block. I think that kind of lit a fire under Iowa because their first three plays they just kicked, it was a 3 and out, and they punted by the way, the punting was fantastic yesterday. By the way, he averaged 58 yards on 2 punts. Thank
Yeah.
God, we didn't need him to punt more than that. Fortunately, we were the recipient of some pretty favorable field position, especially in the second half.
And I was going to mention that as far as skewed stats, we had short field.
Right.
It's harder to have the high number yardage stats like other teams when you're scoring from 40 yards and in.
There were a few things in the first half that you like to see from Iowa. At the end of the half when Michigan State or Washington had scored that field goal that was questionable, then Iowa ran that ball for 50 some yards and they went and actually tried to score a touchdown. And if he would have found Vanderzee open in the corner, which he was open, he just overthrew him. We're talking about Iowa scoring a touchdown with like less than a minute, 40 some seconds left. It was just that it's so unlike Iowa to do something like that. Normally with a lead like that, going into the half, they would have just sat on the ball. I mean, literally, they would have just taken a knee, and then we'll see in the second half.
And I wonder if the opponent had a little bit to do with that because you've got a Washington team that doesn't know Iowa as well as the Big Ten. And, they're used to teams that are, hey, there's a minute left. We're going to try to score. And maybe they went into it thinking, oh, well, Iowa's going to try to pass. They're going to try to get down the field and try to score here, which basically opened up the running lanes. And when you break off one long run like that, 55, 56-yard run, whatever, which gets you inside the 30, that changes the dynamic there. And we've seen it a couple of different times this year where Iowa has attempted to bleed out the clock or appears to attempt to bleed out the clock, but yet Caleb Johnson says, no, I don't think so. I'm gonna bust one off here. And I think maybe that was product of the team we were playing, not really knowing Iowa as well as other teams do. That shouldn't be the case because if you're in the conference, you should know within a few weeks of, okay, this is a team that struggles on offense. They're going to try to take it into the half. They're that's and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were preparing for that, and we don't know what was going through Jed Fish's mind at that time. If he was saying, we want to play straight up here and play a straight up defense, just hope that we can stop them on a running play. But or Iowa just popped one that normally wouldn't have. You don't know.
I think that was mostly the case. If I was to bet, I'd say that Iowa just got lucky and popped one that normally they wouldn't even attempt to do, or it's just one of them situations where maybe they attempted, but they don't. It's defensed better. I think it was just one of them deals where they just got loose. He got loose, and then all of a sudden, hey, everybody's all excited. Let's get some points out of this. We can go into the half, and we're up 20-10 at the half. It's funny we scored 20 in the first half and 20 in the second half, which was nice.
I mean, I don't know. I give credit to the offensive line on that play too. I mean, they bulldozed people, and it was well blocked.
Well, they dominated the line of scrimmage all game
Yeah,
in my book. There were maybe one or two little situations that they had some issues, but it was for the most part they were the more aggressive team. No more truer than that when they got that penalty for basically blocking that kid all the way to the stands
for the
essentially.
bus. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
that was
blindside right
Logan
there.
Jones, I think it was. They said it was somebody else, but I think they said it was Dunker, but it was Logan
Dunker, but
Jones.
yeah, it wasn't. Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
that's.
later on, you saw that same thing when the Iowa second team was in,
Mm-hmm.
and then they got a penalty for pulling on a face mask.
I think that was Mislinski, wasn't it?
It was late in
That,
the game.
I think it was Mislinski that had the second one, and
I didn't see
that
who it
shows a mean
was.
streak to me.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see that. I mean, I didn't like to see the 15 yards. It didn't end up hurting us, but I like that fire of I'm gonna ride him till the whistle, and I'm gonna take him as far away from the play as possible. I had no problem with that. I mean, some people might say, well, riding him into the bench might be a little bit of a dirty play. Yeah, I mean, it's an offensive lineman. Sometimes they don't hear very well.
In that situation, I'm fine with it too. Granted, it didn't hurt us, and I'd probably be less likely to be okay with it had it actually had hurt us. And we're talking about a 28-27 loss, and that might have been the part of the game that cost us the game. Yeah, I would probably be less, but I like to see that fire. I like to see that anger. I like to see that aggressiveness, and that's something going forward that they need to keep going with. They need to keep that aggressive, almost the edge of anger, to the point of just becoming the bullies of the Big Ten again.
Yeah.
There was a while there that they were kind of the bullies of the Big Ten, and they always wore the other team down. If you can stay with us in the first half, but we're going to wear you down in the second half. And I think you saw a little of that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Iowa needs to have to come to continue forward. Granted, our schedule going forward is not daunting like it was in the first half of the schedule. I don't call it daunting. It was more difficult in the first half with Iowa State and Ohio State being on the road, and Washington I didn't think was a bad team. I think we made them yesterday. Iowa made them look bad. I don't think they're bad, and I think they will win some games that I don't think that people are expecting them to win. They already beat Michigan. That was not expected. I don't think anybody expected Washington at the beginning of the year. I didn't.
I could see them beating Indiana. That's going to be a little more difficult. I mean, that's going on the road to Indiana, which,
another trip.
Had it been West Coast, I would definitely give the advantage to Washington in that game.
Absolutely.
But I still could see that being a situation where Washington could win that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a winnable game for them. And so it's kind of weird to say that when you consider the fact that Indiana has been pretty good, but Indiana hasn't really played anybody yet either.
The tougher part of Indiana's schedule is coming up. I did look at that earlier, and they do have Ohio State, and I want to say they don't play Penn State, but they play maybe. I
think they play Michigan.
Okay, there you go. So I thought it was interesting yesterday. They mentioned that the teams that travel more than two time zones or more, meaning anybody from the West Coast that travels to the Midwest or to the East Coast, or vice versa, back and forth, are 1-8. I thought that was very interesting. Now it should be 1-9.
3-9. It should be 3-9 now.
3-9. Okay, because Minnesota won their game.
Well, 3-10 because Ohio State lost. Penn State went out
Penn
to
State
USC and won. Yep. So
yeah. Who did Minnesota? They played UCLA, right?
UCLA and
and had to come back
score at the very end to win it. Yeah. I watched quite a bit of that game. I know that a lot of people would be like, well, why weren't you watching Oregon and Ohio State? Well, those kind of games give me a little bit of a panic attack because I just, there's so much going on that I know that they're good teams, and I'm going to get that shoved down my throat later. So I'm probably going to watch more of the lesser broadcast games like the Minnesota and UCLA, or the what else was on last night that I watched?
Kansas State and Colorado.
Oh yeah, I didn't really watch a whole lot of that.
I watched a little of that.
I can't watch Colorado anymore. I used to like Colorado as a university. I can't stand them anymore.
Well, I like to watch them get beat.
Yeah, but I think I watched Wyoming and Fresno State or something like that.
Okay.
Because those games aren't going to get the play. I mean, I'm going to get the broadcast and the highlights of Ohio State and Oregon basically shoved down my throat,
Right.
and I'm going to know everything that happened in that game without having to watch it. Whereas
Yeah.
Minnesota UCLA, that's a different story. I'm not going to get that put in my face every 5 seconds. So I tend to gravitate more to those types of games on weekends than I do to the big games. Now, if it's a really big game, like if it's Ohio State, Michigan, yeah, I'll watch that because that's
Yeah.
just one of those games that you have to watch. But I don't know. I just struggle sometimes to watch those games. I had struggled to watch Penn State USC. It just there's other teams to watch that I'm not going to have the exposure to, and I know I'm going to get the highlights of everything else, so and get caught up on it. So
Yeah,
I
the Big Ten highlights you're going to get ad nauseum. Ohio State and Oregon on the Big Ten Network, pretty
yeah.
much 24/7 for the next 3 days. I noticed that when I was flipping through the TV guide to see when Iowa, plays their game in 60, the 1 hour condensed version, you have to watch all the way. You have to wait until all the way 10 o'clock tonight. But by the same token, you can watch Oregon and Ohio State at least twice in that
Oh, I'm
time.
sure.
So and don't get me wrong, that's the big game. That is the big
Yeah.
game. That was the big game of the weekend, and that's the game that drew all the attention. And that's fine. But there comes a time, and I don't want to go off on a rant about the Big Ten Network. The Big Ten Network knows exactly where their bread is buttered.
Oh, yeah.
Michigan and Ohio State, now Oregon and USC. They're going to show those four teams. Penn State. They're going to show those 4 or 5 teams 100 times before they show Rutgers or Minnesota or Michigan State once. That's just the way it is. The blue
Yeah,
bloods always get it.
there's definitely tiers to the Big Ten network.
Mm-hmm.
You got those top 5, and then I'd say you'd probably throw Wisconsin, Iowa, probably Nebraska, um, into that second tier group. Um, maybe Illinois this year, just based on the fact that they're ranked.
Yeah.
And then your lower tiers are going to be, the Rutgers, the Maryland, Northwestern. And I'm not saying lower tiers in the sense of I think they're crap programs or anything like that. I'm just saying that in the eyes of the network of what they bring, they are a class below the class above them, and then the class above them is a class below the top 5.
Yeah.
Because they're just bringing the eyeballs and they're bringing that tradition and that blue blood mentality, I guess, or blue blood aspect to them. Again, that's no fault to those universities. They just have to start winning and turn things around now. Because let's be honest, Oregon wasn't a blue blood until probably 15, 20 years ago.
20 years, yeah.
Once Phil Knight started pumping money into that program. They were a decent program prior to that. I mean, I remember Iowa playing them back in the 80s and early 90s and beating them a couple of times or once and then getting throttled by them a couple of times.
Stumped, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not like they're new to the party, but once that Nike money started flowing in, and that's, I don't even want to get started on the whole buying teams aspect of it, but it's difficult. That's kind of why it's difficult for me to watch some of these more prominent teams like the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Alabamas, because if I'm going to watch that, I might as well just watch the NFL because that's what it is.
Let's get back to the Iowa game. Let's talk about the second half. I think everything kind of changed when the interception did Jamari Harris, because Washington did just exactly what they did to start the third as what they did to start the game. After Iowa had punted to them, they ran right down the field. And they were doing the same thing in the third quarter after they got in the opening kickoff the third quarter. They ran right down the field, and if he didn't throw that, I think give Jamari Harris credit for the way he played that. He did. And that kind of turned things around a little bit. That kind of, they were thinking that they could get right back in the game, make it 2017. Never know what's going to happen from there. Well, then he picks that ball off. Iowa goes down, ended up kicking the field goal. They had the ball first and goal at the 1-2 yard line. Didn't score. That was kind of a disappointment, but it happens.
I do want to mention the fact that all the backup quarterback gurus out there that think that he always has to come in those situations. That was a full Brandon Sullivan drive, and they didn't score a
Well,
touchdown. So
a
I'm not
series
saying
of
that,
them.
I didn't want to, yeah, series, sorry. I'm not saying that I just, think it's funny how, oh, well, he just needs to come in every single time. He's going to score every time. It's not going to happen. And he made a bonehead play that he's lucky that his knee was down.
Yeah.
And I think he would probably be the first to admit that that was the dumbest thing he could do. Just
Right.
take the sack,
Yep. Get the 3.
get the 3. I don't risk anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I even said when it happened, I'm like, he was down.
I said it
There's
too.
no way. There's no way. And of course, I said the same thing about the field goal too, that it was no way that that was good. But anyway, um, but yeah, I just let's don't be so quick to say that the backup is always going to make everything better, because that would have been a disastrous thing there.
Yeah. Yeah, but at that point, though, you're up 20-10. Let's say, and I don't want to get into what ifs, but let's say what if he did fumble that ball and Washington got on it? Who's to say they would have punted 3-4 plays later?
Had they not blown it dead, I think he might have ran it back for a
Well,
pick.
I'm glad
Fumble recovery for a touchdown.
it worked out, but this, I got to say, the refereeing crew was a little bit.
Brutal.
I thought that sometimes they looked like they were just confused and didn't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I counted
The
3 different instances. I think I sent it to you. There's 3 different instances where I said, these guys don't have a clue what's going on. The catch along the sidelines that they tried to say was a catch initially, and I'm like, there is no way that guy was even remotely close to being in bounds. And then, of course, after the 30-second discussion, oh, well, we'll call it a no catch. Or what was the other 2 that I remember?
fumble, KJ had a fumble, and they marked it down, and it was close, but they went back and looked at it. And then the field goal, where one looked over at the other one looked over at him, and kind of they both went, I don't know, you okay, good. And then, then you can't review it. You could review the review to find out if it's reviewable, and then find out it's not, which is confusing, but I understand it, I guess, in my weird way. There was something else.
Yeah, I don't remember which one it
that
was.
fumble at the end, or that Iowa, they said he fumbled, but his knee was down.
Yeah.
I guess I understand kind of why they have to let the thing play out and call it, and then find out if it stands or if it's reviewed and then overturned. I get it, but I think sometimes you have to try to make the right call instead of just letting it play out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just felt like that was not the situation. And of course, a lot of people say, well, this is the same crew that did the Iowa Minnesota game with the invalid fair catch. But as I was reminded last night, it wasn't their call on the invalid fair catch. It was the replay officials back in wherever that
New York
made that
or
call.
wherever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tim O'Day, I'll give you a pass on that one, because that wasn't your fault. And I think he's probably got to be thinking to himself, I never want to do a game in Iowa City again.
And you know something?
Weird stuff happens.
He did that Minnesota game the year before, and called it was Jack Campbell or somebody was out as they was running. So, as far as we're concerned, Tim O'Day, we really don't want you to come back and do another game in Iowa City. So, find something else to do. Go do Drake. Go do Nebraska. Go do anything else. We don't care.
Wartburg, something a little more your speed.
Yeah. Johnston Middle School. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to call out some guys that I thought really had great games yesterday.
Okay.
Reese Dakin on his 2 punts, 58-yard average, fantastic. Needed that one. He punted from his 10-yard line all the way down to their 15. That was a great punt, just a rocket. Aaron Graves, great first half. Thought he played very well pretty much most of the game till at of course the end he got pulled out.
I think he got dinged up a little bit, because I remember them saying that he had come out and then he ended up going back in, but I don't think he was quite the same. Still disruptive enough.
I thought Xavier Wampa got a fire lit under him. If nothing else, at the half, I think he played all right in the first half. I know he missed a tackle on a tight end, and I thought he went up to hit him and he just bounced off the guy. And I said, you got to wrap up there. You got to do something different. Did better tackling technique than that. And I think somebody ripped him on the sidelines for it. And I think it may have lit a fire under him, a little more motivation, and he went out and had a pretty good second half.
Yeah.
Of course, it's easy to play when you're ahead like that and take a little more chance. But I thought he played okay. Played pretty good. Probably his best game this year. I thought Cade McNamara, even though he didn't throw the ball a lot, I thought the passes, there was at least two, passes that I thought that he threw really on time and in stride. That one to Seth Anderson in the third quarter on a 3rd and 10 for 18. Plus, then they tacked on the 15-yard penalty for the when they threw him down. And then that pass to the touchdown right after the 4th down conversion that Washington didn't get.
Yeah.
That was some beautiful pass in stride. He didn't have to slow up to catch it. He just caught it in stride right into the end zone. And I thought those were two really, really good passes that he threw. That I like to see that, because a lot of times it seemed like in the past you'd throw that ball and he'd be behind the receiver. He'd either have to reach back and, of course, slow up. And by the time you slow up, you're just allowing the other player to get closer to you because you had to slow up. And you're not getting a touchdown at that point. You're getting maybe an 8 to 10 yard gain, or in Howard's case, maybe a 20-yard gain, and you're getting tackled. Well, you hit him in stride just like you did, and bam, touchdown. And he got his second. I was going to say he got his second ever touchdown. Well, not ever, but in an Iowa uniform against a Power 4 conference opponent.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that last week.
Here's the thing that I noticed the most about it. Both those plays were on slant plays.
Mm-hmm.
Slant plays over the middle, short, easy passes that exploit the middle of the zone. And, I just don't understand why it's something that has been used against us ad nauseum for the last 15 years, why it's something we haven't adopted as part of our staple. We don't have to throw the ball 35 yards down the field to get a 35-yard gain in that situation. A catch and run on a 5-yard slant can get you 30 yards if you do it right, or it can get you 20. You don't have to go deep pass every single time to get the ball down the field on a deep pattern. So it also frees up your offensive line so that they don't have to block as long, and gives your playmakers a chance to make plays. I think that's something that maybe we're starting to see a little bit more from Tim Lester, is things that I've seen over the last 10 or 15 years that I'm like, why aren't we exploiting this? And why are we just not doing this? I don't know if it wasn't in the playbook prior to what the deal was, but I see him doing that more and throwing in the motion with, the deceptive motion. There was one play in there, I think it was, we'd run a play where we brought the motion guy across and we handed the ball off and went the same direction as him. And then, I don't know, maybe got 8 or 10 yards on that. And I think it was Mari Moulton or Jazz Patterson that ran the ball at that time. And then we come back later, we ran that same exact motion, but instead of following, we went the other direction and picked up, I don't know, 8 or 10 yards on that one too. It's like, okay, so that's setting up something later on that give them the same look. They expect the same thing, and you didn't do the same thing. And that's stuff that we aren't used to seeing in Iowa over the last few years, because if you go back and you were to watch tape, if we ran the same motion and the same formation, it's going to be the same play to the same spot. And we're not seeing that as much out of Tim Lester, which I'm appreciative of. I think that's great, and he's starting to put the pieces together a little bit, and I think the guys are starting to figure it out a little bit.
Well, I was just going to say, does this seem like yesterday's game was more of the Tim Lester than what we've seen in the past? I mean, does it seem like this was more, he was allowed to be more creative than he had ever been before, allowed to be?
I don't know so much creative, or just allowed to be himself, to play his game plan.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think it seemed like that more yesterday. I think that, Kirk's got an idea of these other teams, and he's like, oh, okay, this should work against them, so I want you to do this. Well, you've done that before, and maybe it worked for you a couple of times, and maybe it didn't work for you a couple of times. So why not try something that they're not used to? I think we saw a little bit of that against Minnesota too. And I think second half, Tim Lester kind of was given free rein again. And, I don't want to say that he's been the savior of the offense, which for all intents and purposes, basically has. Caleb Johnson's been the savior of the offense for the most part.
Yeah.
But I think the play calling and the structure and the motion and all that has done wonders to allow the offense to be more proficient. It doesn't even have to be a different play than what they've run in the past. It's just the look is different, the feel is different to it. The defense doesn't understand it as easily. We go back several years ago, and I think one of the Big Ten coaches says, think about playing Iowa. We know exactly what they're going to do. We know the plays that they're going to run as they line them up. You just got to stop them, and they have to, they'll out execute you. Well, when you're not out executing teams, they're going to stop those plays. Now, you're basically running those same plays. I mean, you look around, plays on every team are virtually the same. It's just the formations, it's just the motion, it's just the alignment is making it different. So you're just changing things up and running the same thing, but it's such a different look to other teams that they're not, oh, God, we don't know what this play's going to be. We've seen this formation from Iowa before, and they've run this, but they didn't do it this time.
Right.
Now what do? We don't have that idiot's guide to playing Iowa along the sidelines anymore. The water boy where they're sitting there looking at his playbook and he doesn't know what to do. It's different, and I think if that's allowed to happen and he's allowed to run his offense the way he wants to, that will be better going forward.
Now, the reason why I really brought this up is because I wanted to mention the play in the first half when Iowa took the snap and Weegan came from the left side to the right side on it wasn't motion, it was after the snap motion. He had run across behind and it looked like you could either flip it to the running back who was running an outside pitch play. Option pitch play. And he come across and took the pitch and ran it the opposite way and got, I think, 11 yards out of it. It was a first down. This was when Iowa was running down. I want to say it was that second drive when they scored the touchdown of the first half, because the first drive didn't do anything. The second drive they actually ran down and literally looked good. They looked like they were fantastic, like they figured it out. But I thought there was no I've never seen Iowa run that play. Not even in Hayden Fry era. I had never seen that play run by an Iowa Hawkeye team.
I've seen the jet sweep like that, but I've never seen it go the opposite direction of what the flow of the offense was going.
And at that point, I thought to myself, wow, he's letting Tim Lester run the game today. And he may be letting him run the game until something happens, then he might take it away from him. But he's giving him the free rein to do what he needs to do, or he's letting out enough leash before he hangs himself. So, it was nice to see. And actually, I think he ran the offense the entire game. And it was beautiful. It was nice to see. Iowa played as good as they've ever played. It's under this current, well, I shouldn't say that they've ever played, but in the last 5 years, since probably the Ohio State game in 2017. I haven't seen Iowa really play that well on on offense. They always play well on defense, but on offense, I don't know. Maybe my view is skewed because I've been so inundated with poor offensive performances in the past 3 years that when they finally break out and have a good performance against a decent team, it just makes you feel like, oh, that sun feels so much warmer today.
I would say the last time that the offense played as efficient as they did yesterday was possibly 2019 against USC in the Holiday Bowl.
Or 2021 against Maryland when they ran 51 up on them. But some of that
but
was
a lot of that was defensive. Picking off Tallulah a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's games in there that I'm missing that we probably had, but I'm thinking back to the Nate Stanley days. That's the last time I feel like the offense really clicked.
Yeah.
You could say it was the personnel. I don't know if it was the personnel because Petrus had a pretty good game yesterday for Utah State and has had a pretty decent season there. So I don't know that it was personnel and that it was more scheme and play calling. I was very much a give Brian Ferentz a chance. After him being gone now, I'm seeing that was definitely an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else do I want to call out? I thought Ethan Herkett and Max Llewellyn did very well.
Yeah.
I want to call them out. I thought that Reese Vanderzee had a good game. He only caught, did he only catch one pass? I think he only caught one pass.
Two, I thought.
Or maybe two. Lachey, I think he was a recipient of 3. So, you had 3 and Vanderzee had 2. That's 5. And then Howard had 1.
Seth
Anderson had 1. And I know somebody else had 1. Or maybe one of those guys had. Anyway, it ended up being 8 completions. Like I say, those stats are not going to blow you away, but you didn't have to. You didn't need them. Just give the ball to KJ and let him do his thing. That's all you have to do.
The one stat you can look at just to tell how a game goes is the number of punts. And when you only punt twice, your offense must be doing something, or your defense is putting you in a really good position every single time.
Well, Washington only punted once.
Yeah, the defense did put us in good positions because they stopped him on 4th down 3 times.
You should call out Cajun Weegan for that punt return too. That set up a very nice short field.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Washington he's going to break one of these days.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But Washington only punted the one time for 43 yards. So, it's like, they were going for 4th down several times. Didn't get it. I think they were 3 of 6 on 4th down. Yeah, 3 of 6. And I think those 3 came late in the game with that other quarterback in towards the end.
Well, and that's something that they're going to have to learn in this Big Ten era is you might have been able to get away with that in the Pac-12 where there's not as much defense, but you're in a Big Ten where there's better defenses and you're not going to make those 4th downs like you used to. And sometimes, you look at your opponent and you say, okay, well, I'm down 10 or I'm down 13. In some cases, you think 13 is a pretty insurmountable lead. I'm going to go ahead and punt it and make them go 80 yards as opposed to try it and not get it and make them go 30.
Yeah.
And I think that's where he needs to learn kind of one of those situations where I say you got to know your audience, so to speak. Know where you're playing, and know who you're playing. And understand that, okay, their bread and butter is their defense. If I don't make this, I'm giving an offense that's not as good a really short field to score on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care how bad your offense is. You give somebody a 30-yard field, you're going to give up, 3 different times, you're going to give up a minimum of 9 points.
Yeah.
So you just got to understand that it's not the Pac-12. It's not what you're used to. You're going to have to learn to punt and play for the next set of downs. There's still plenty of time. Make these teams, and to that caveat, I would say, looking at the scores, this isn't the typical Big Ten West type of teams this year either, because look at the amount of points the Big Ten West teams scored yesterday or over the weekend.
Yeah.
And a lot of them playing teams from the East or new teams.
What Wisconsin did to Rutgers was really eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Northwestern and Maryland.
Right.
The eye opener was the Illinois Purdue on that one. I just boggled my mind. We'll get into that here in a bit. Let's wrap up on this one first, and then we'll do a little bit of preview of the Michigan State. I don't know a ton about Michigan State.
I've got some things here.
So all in all, very good day. When I said I thought they were very close to putting together a full game, I felt like the defense needed about a quarter to get revved up. Had they not had that first 2 drives where Washington just basically drove right down the field on them, I probably would have felt a lot better. But, they only got 7 points out of that.
That's the old bend but don't break type thing that we've always talked about and heard about.
So, I also want to call out Eli Miller.
Yes.
Wasn't in there a ton, but boy, when you watch those plays where, Caleb Johnson got some pretty big runs, Eli Miller was lead blocking on those.
Lead blocking, yeah.
And you had Hayden Large was out. and Stringa was out. So you had guys that aren't normally in there as much. I
Johnny
think I think
Pascuzzi.
yeah, I think Eli Miller had only had like 6 plays in that game. But I think I saw him all 6 plays lay a critical block.
Yep.
So, I want to give props where props are due. That was something that doesn't go unnoticed by this fan, at least.
Right. No, I number 31. He absolutely, especially on that touchdown,
Yep.
he hit that edge rusher and just pushed him far enough away that Caleb was able to bounce off of that initial and then dive into that hole. That was beautiful. It was a thing of beauty to watch. And yeah, absolutely. Eli Miller, congratulations to you. You had a great game, bud.
The other play that I remember the most, that I kind of had to chuckle a little bit about, it's a little aggravated at some of the defensive secondary earlier in the game because they weren't wrapping up. They were just trying to hit and knock them down. However, when Jamari Harris intercepted that pass, Sebastian Castro was leading the way for the return, and he lit up an offensive lineman. And I mean, he put him parallel. And I was like, wow, here's a hybrid safety that's lighting up an offensive lineman and just laying him flat. I was like, that is what I want to see. So call out to those two guys. I thought those were very well done and love to see it. So
yeah, good day all around for the Hawks. Next up,
move on to the next one. Move on to Michigan State next week.
And is a night game on NBC at 6:30.
Yep.
I think it's a 6:30 start. I don't know if that's Eastern or Central time.
7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central.
Central. Okay, so it is 6:30 Central. I got some preview stuff here for Michigan State. I'll just go ahead and go through this real quick. Michigan State's 3-3 on the season. They won their first 3, lost their second 3. They are 1-2 in the conference. They are under first-year head coach Jonathan Smith, former head coach at Oregon State. The games they played this year, they've beaten Florida Atlantic 16-10. They beat a conference foe Maryland's 27-24. They did beat Prairie View A&M 40-0. They lost to Boston College 23-19. They lost to Ohio State 38-7, and they lost to Oregon 31-10. So those 3 losses, 2 of those are to the top 3 teams they were the top 3 teams in the nation. They average 19.83 points per game while allowing 21. Their quarterback is Aiden Childs. He's a sophomore. He is 86 of 152 for 56.6% completion percentage. He has 1,212 yards, 5 TDs, but he also has 8 pickoffs. So he's very prone to the turnover, but he will run. He's a running type quarterback. He does have some yards running the ball. So that's something Iowa has to be really cognizant of. If Iowa would happen to knock them out, or if he performs poorly, they do have a backup named Tommy Schuster. Probably heard his name before mentioned. He is 16 of 21 this year for 76.2% average completion percentage, and he has 166 yards, no TDs, but no picks. Running back is kind of a two-headed monster type of thing. Ron Lynch Adams, 67 carries, 338 yards. He's averaging 5 yards a carry, 2 TDs, and he's also got 3 receptions for 31 yards. Another running back, Nate Carter, who does play quite a bit. He's got 58 carries for 245 yards. He averages 4.2 per carry. He is 1 TD. He does have 5 receptions for 20 yards. Another person who catches the ball quite frequently is their tight end, Jack Velling. He has 19 receptions for 238 yards. He has no TDs, and he catches for an average of 12.5 yards per catch. Wide receiver, Montori Foster Jr. He has 22 receptions, 274 yards, 12.5 average, 1 TD. And Nick Marsh, 16 receptions, 320 yards. He is averaging 20 yards per catch. He has 1 TD, and he also has 2 carries, probably end around type situations, but not for very much, 2 yards. On defense, they are pretty decent. Charles Brantley, 23 tackles, 3 pickoffs. He's a cornerback. He also ran a pickoff back for 100 yards. So he has 101 yards of return yardage, and he has that 1 TD. Angelo Gross, 23 tackles, 1 pick. Malik Spencer, 17 tackles and 1 pick. And their linebackers are Jordan Turner. He has 22 tackles and 3 sacks, 1 pick. Linebacker Cal Holiday, 28 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Pretty decent in special teams. Kicker Jonathan Kim, who everybody knows who that is from last year. I think he holds the stadium record or tied the stadium record at Iowa for longest field goal. He is 9 for 9 on field goal attempts this year with a long of 51. However, he has missed an extra point. He is 11 of 12. Explain that one. Punter Ryan Eckley, 23 punts. He's averaging 48 yards per punt, and his long is 61. So their punter and Iowa's punter are very close to the same match. They're about the same kind of punter. Other than that, one of the things you got to watch out for with Michigan State is the run pass option, or RPO, with Aiden Childs. He is going to take off and run with that ball as many times as you're going to see probably Iowa play a team all year. So you got to be really watching the quarterback. You almost have to kind of almost do a spy situation on him, because he will burn you if you don't pay attention to him. That's something that Iowa in defense. And I know Phil Parker will get this 100% figured out. I know he knows what's going on. I'm sure they have scouts that are out there telling him exactly. He's got more stats than I'll ever have in my life. So he'll know exactly what's going on with Michigan State. And I think that Iowa might be at a slight disadvantage of having it being a night game. I don't like playing night games away from Kinnick because they're always tougher. I know we have one coming up. I actually have 2 more, UCLA and Nebraska. But Iowa is
Nebraska is
a home
at
game.
home.
So, but I'm just saying we have 2 more home game or night games for sure, and maybe another one if they decide to change some of those. But no, I don't. That's about all I really have on Michigan State. I think they're okay. Like I say, their 3 losses come to really 3 decent teams. Boston College is not great, but they're not bad. That was a close game. That was on the road.
Yeah, but I look at the wins as well, and
Right.
You've beaten Florida Atlantic. You beat them 16-10.
Yep.
You've beaten Maryland, who I thought was going to be better than they are, but the undisciplinedness of a Maryland team, a Mike Loxley coached team, is prominent there. And they just got throttled by Northwestern, who I think is not even maybe as good as Michigan State.
No.
And then you've beaten Florida A&M. So you really have beaten Prairie View A&M, which is even worse.
Yeah.
So you really haven't played anybody. You haven't beaten anybody that's worth a darn. I think that's where Iowa has had a little bit more of a test. Beating Minnesota, beating Washington, and Minnesota on the road. That's, I don't think that's a really good Minnesota team. No. They are 4-3,
but they are taking care of business.
Yeah, I mean they struggled yesterday against UCLA, but again,
that's the win.
That's traveling 2 time zones, and you still got the win in the West Coast.
Yep.
So I think the advantage is definitely in Iowa's favor. They've had a more of a schedule to get them prepared for something like this. I would be surprised if this is a really close game at any point in the second half. I would say, worst case scenario is similar to last year. Where I think Iowa won 26-16.
16, yeah.
But I'm thinking more along the lines of kind of like yesterday, more like a Minnesota game, 31-10 or 34-10, 34-14, something to that effect. I would be very, very shocked because I think Iowa can run against them, even though they're going to set up, and I think Iowa will be able to throw against them. And I think you've seen, outside of Ohio State, throw Ohio State out the window because that's a really good team. But
yeah,
I think you get Cade away from Kinnick. He's a different quarterback because he doesn't have the pressure on him as much. Because you can't help but think that in the back of his mind that every time he makes a mistake, he's going to get booed in Kinnick. And, you can't help but have that in your mind. But it's not going to happen on the road. So you're a little more loose and you're a little bit more able to go out and just play your game. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, I hope they have that. Tim Lester said that Iowa had as good a week as they'd had the whole time he'd been there. And I hope they continue to just basically snowball off of that effect and continue to improve week after week. And, if that continues, I don't see a team on the rest of Iowa's schedule that Iowa couldn't at least be favored in every game.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Wisconsin seems to be catching fire and figuring it out. They looked really good yesterday against at Rutgers even. And Rutgers is known for having, a pretty decent defense.
Sounds of it, Rutgers had a lot of guys that were injured.
Oh, okay. So I didn't get to see any of the game. We were actually watching the Iowa game at the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll see how the rest of the
that.
schedule, for Iowa kind of comes out. But like I said, I think it was drastically easier. I said this last week. I thought Washington might be a little bit of a hiccup. I didn't think they would lose, but I thought that they may struggle a little bit, but they didn't struggle really all that much. So going forward, I think it just gets a little easier. I hope Northwestern's just was a flash in the pan on Friday.
I just think that's a product of playing Maryland, who I don't think is very good right now.
Yeah, and then we actually have Maryland out at in Maryland, so
yeah.
I think it's the schedule
lined up for a 10-win season. It really is.
It is lined up for a 10-win season.
And if anybody wants to complain about a 10-win season, then they should go be a fan of someplace else.
Well, I think 10 wins at this point, you're in the conversation for a playoff spot, especially if you only have the one loss in the Big Ten. Now, here's the thing. If let's say Iowa only has one loss and Penn State only has one loss, and they're both to Ohio State, would you give that? I would think you'd give it to Penn State because they probably had a harder schedule than Iowa did.
Yeah.
So you'd probably let them go in there and get beat by Ohio State. That way they got 3 losses. Iowa jumps over them and takes the playoff spot from them.
Yeah, and that brings me into the national landscape of the rankings.
Yep.
And I know that you look at it and say, okay, well, Iowa's lost on the road to Ohio State. Let's just say they finished 10-2.
Okay.
You lost on the road to Ohio State, and you got a top 10 Iowa State team that you lost by 1 point at home. Probably shouldn't have lost. Well, I'm going to back that trolley truck up just a little bit because I don't think the national eyes on Iowa State are as bright as people think they are. Iowa State wants to say that this is the greatest team ever or whatever. I don't care. They played nobody. Other than Iowa, they played nobody. The Big 12 that they've played so far is probably the weakest section of the Big 12 that you could possibly play, with the exception of they haven't played Oklahoma State or TCU, which are both brutally bad. But you played Houston, who was awful, and you struggled with them. You played West Virginia, who is not good, and you really didn't blow them out. And who was the other one? Baylor. Baylor's bad. You don't play BYU. Look at it as a blessing. It pains me to say that they're probably going to win 10 games because I don't want to see that happen. But from an Iowa perspective, yeah, it's good for us. But I don't ever want to hear anybody complain or say, oh, well, Iowa was 12-0 in 2015 and they had a weak schedule. Well, Iowa's schedule in 2015 probably was a little more strong than Iowa State's is this year. And you're talking about Iowa State being the best thing since sliced bread. Give me a break. You're playing weak competition, and you're probably going to win 10 games. Congratulations to you for your first 10-win season ever. Not going to give you that congratulations yet because you still have to do it. There's plenty of times for Matt Campbell to choke. Because Utah's not that good. They proved that over the weekend. They're not as good as people thought they might have been. I don't think Kansas State is all that great. And you miss out.
They might be the second best.
Yeah, and you miss out on BYU, who was probably the class of the Big 12 right now. You miss out on Arizona. You miss out on Arizona State. You don't play Oklahoma State, which probably would have been a win anyway. You don't play TCU. Now, you still have to play Texas Tech, and Texas Tech is a prolific offense, but I don't know if Texas Tech could stop a a little kid from running through their line. Just I don't know. I I want people to say back the truck up on that, because
Yeah.
let's don't down Iowa for the schedule that they've had, and then prop up your own team based on the fact that your schedule is as weak as or weaker than theirs has been.
Yeah, I
But
just think everybody needs to pump the brakes on Iowa State at this point, all the Iowa State fans. But by the same token, they continue to win. It's going to help
yeah,
Iowa.
yeah,
So, you hate to root for them, but by the same token, rooting for them, I'm not, and I won't root for them. I'll just not root at all.
right,
And if they win, they continue to win. That's good for them, and it's good for us. If they lose, then at that point, get out of my face. I don't need you anymore. Goodbye.
yeah. So, well, let's wrap that up. And I do want to bring up the fact that we did have Big Ten or Iowa Media Days for the basketball teams recently. Women did get a commit from a 6'4", 6'5" forward out of Alaska yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. Um,
Yes.
and the men have missed out on a few top targets, but they did still have some guys in recently for visits. So that's, in this landscape of NIL, it is very difficult. I think that the basketball team's going to find it the most difficult. Um, it's it's hard to compete when you can't just throw millions of dollars at somebody that, you've got guys out there that are expecting $500,000 that I wouldn't pay $50,000 for in NIL, but that's just the nature of the beast right now. And, it's
Yeah.
going to be difficult for Fran to recruit with that mindset, with kids having that mindset now. It's a money grab for them. And until there's something that's regulated within the NCAA about the amount of NIL money you can get, it's going to be a struggle for teams like Iowa that doesn't have the deep pockets like an Oregon, like an Ohio State, like an Alabama, like a Michigan,
Right.
that can go, or Kansas in basketball,
Mm-hmm.
can go out and
Duke.
just throw money at them.
Right.
Texas Tech's another one that just seems to have unlimited pockets when it comes to basketball recruits. So,
And
it's tough to
believe it or
compete.
not, today's as the day that we're recording this is on the 13th. You're about 2.5 weeks away from basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Does it seem like it could be? It's really crept up quick on me. We're deep in football here, and I look up and it's 2 weeks to basketball, and you've got some exhibition games coming up soon. And
I think isn't the first Iowa's exhibition like a week, 2 weeks from today?
I could be
Something like
that
that, maybe?
would make it the 27th,
Something
probably.
like that.
And then maybe their first real game might be just after the 1st of November. I think the
Yeah.
women
I
play.
think they have a week off, and then they play their first game like the November 3rd or something like that.
Yeah, I think the women play on the 2nd. I think that might be an exhibition too, but I'd have to look at their schedule. Like I say, this creeped up on me, and I haven't really had a chance to dive into any of their stuff yet. So dates and games and stuff like that are still a little cloudy in my head. I don't remember. I just remember it's coming up soon,
Mm-hmm.
early November. There'll be some tournaments and stuff like that. Bahamas and that kind of thing. Some Florida tournaments that they'll be in. So there'll be some games that you're not going to be able to probably catch on TV. They'll either be on specialty networks that you don't pay for every year like I don't. And so we'll have to kind of see YouTube highlights, and that's what I'll probably rely on a little bit.
Yeah. I typically will buy some of those packages like the Big Ten Network. I'll usually get that in November to get me through those preseason
Real
or
early
pre-conference
games.
games that
Yeah.
get me into January, and then everything's basically broadcast after that. Then I forget to cancel it and end up having it through the spring and watch baseball games too. So that's fine. Uh, but yeah, you're right. It has crept up on us, and I'm excited to see both teams just to see what they're going to do. I think the men's team's probably a little more athletic than they've been in the last few years, but we'll have to wait and see. I want to see that. I think if they can tighten up a little bit on the defensive side, that they're always going to be a team that scores.
Yeah.
So if they can tighten up a little bit on the defensive side, it could be, it could be a fringe NCAA year. If the defense isn't any better than it normally is, I don't know. Based on the teams that they play, I don't know that it's, you might be looking
Well,
at a high in NIT bid, possibly that play-in game, but
their goal should be every year 20 wins, and I think 20 wins either gets you in a lot of years or it gets you right on the bubble to where you're being talked about being in. So I think they should look for a minimum every year of getting 20 wins. Now, I don't care how they get those, if they've got to load their schedule up with cupcakes the first 8 or 10, but Iowa doesn't always do that. I know they play Iowa State and they play a couple of other little teams that are probably pretty decent. And then they will throw in your Georgia Southerns and your Alcorn States and whatever other teams that they want to pay them to come in and basically feed their budgets, those other small schools. Well, that's fine. But yeah, 20 wins should be your minimum. You should look for that every year. And anything over 20 just solidifies your place in the pecking order as far as going to the tournament.
Yeah, and then again, I'm prefacing this on the fact that I know nothing about any of the other Big Ten teams.
Right. It's going to be
hard
to say.
Indiana's probably going to be pretty good. Illinois is probably going to be good. Purdue's going to be good. Michigan State's going to be good. After that, I really don't know.
No more Zach.
I don't know anything. No, but they probably replaced him with another 7'9" guy.
They seem to always get him. I don't know where they find him, but they seem to always get him.
Yep. He looks for him.
Yeah.
They go there. So anyway,
got a lot of money.
Yep. All right, so let's wrap up on that. Just wanted to bring that up, that basketball season is right around the corner. But with that said, if you like the content you've seen here, please give us a like and a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. Check us out on Facebook. Punting is Winning. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok. We're all over the media, social media.
I got one more thing I want to say.
Okay.
I know there's some people out there that are not big Kirk Ferentz fans, and but I do want to congratulate him on getting 200 wins yesterday.
Yes.
That's an important milestone. He's got, I think, Woody Hayes might have 206.
205.
So 205. So if he gets to 206, then he has the all-time winningest football coach in Big Ten history. That's an important milestone.
10-win season will get him there.
The 10-win season will get him there, and I think he wants to get that 10-win season, obviously.
Yeah.
And then if he gets that record, who knows what's going to happen in the offseason. He may say, I've done what I wanted to do, and I may call it, but he may say, I think I can get another 10 or 15 or 20, and then I'll figure it out. Who knows?
Yeah.
But congratulations for him to get to 200.
Yep. Do you want to lead us out with the question of the week?
The question of the week is, when was the last time Michigan State beat Iowa in football?
Yep.
What year? You can give me a score too if you want. We're going to make these a little easier because nobody seems to want to answer the question. So Dean or South Bend Hawkeye, you guys can get on here. Maybe Kelvin, get in here and answer the question for us.
Yeah.
I'm calling you guys out, by the way.
Yeah, you guys are usually the ones that are the voice of our criticisms, so to speak. I don't know if they want to call them criticisms, but call us out on stuff, and you answer our questions usually. So
this is going to determine whether or not they listened all the way to the end.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that does lead us out to the end, and quite a week for the Iowa football team. Let's hope for next week it's just as nice, and
another win.
Another win. Just keep the train rolling and work our way to 10-2 and see what happens from there.
Yep.
So,
okay.
All right. With that said, let's end it up with the Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.